This AI-generated podcast is for general information only and does not constitute financial or legal advice. Please consult a qualified professional. Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast, produced by Bertrand Mariaux, a regulatory lawyer qualified as Avocat à la Cour in Luxembourg and Paris. This show brings you reliable insights on Luxembourg regulations sourced from curated official references. This episode is current as of 26 May 2026.
Thank you for setting that up.
Yeah. So today we are embarking on a deep dive into the Luxembourg Law of 5, August 2005. This covers financial collateral arrangements. And, we're treating this as a strictly practical masterclass. We have 3 core takeaways to cover today, along with one primary must-know thesis that really dictates how you should approach this entire framework.
Right, and we should establish that thesis immediately. If you remember only one thing from our discussion today, it is this. The 2005 law is fundamentally an execution statute. Its entire value relies on the precise, meticulous matching of your legal drafting to the strict operational reality of the assets.
Right, so zero gap between what the contract says and what the account actually does.
Exactly. It is about absolute alignment. If your drafting does not perfectly mirror the operational mechanics of control and enforcement, the statutory protections simply will not function. That is the lens through which we have to view all 3 of our takeaways today.
Perfect. So let's jump right into the first core takeaway, which is statutory eligibility. Essentially determining what assets even qualify for these protections.
Yes. A legal review under this framework must begin with Article 1. The law explicitly restricts the definition of eligible assets to just 2 categories. You have financial instruments and you have claims.
Okay. And just to keep it grounded, financial instruments would be things like shares, fund units, bonds. Right.
Correct. And then for claims, we're referring to monetary claims or account balances. If the collateral you are evaluating does not fit strictly into one of those 2 statutory categories, you are operating outside the parameters of the 2005 law. You do not get its specific protections.
But, I'm looking at the source briefing here, and it's clear the framework has been actively modernized. Specifically, there's a March 2023 update regarding financial instruments.
That is a critical modernization. The legislature expanded the definition to explicitly include secured electronic registration mechanisms.
So, distributed ledgers, like blockchain technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
DLT and electronic databases are covered, but they must still fundamentally qualify as financial instruments. So we're talking about tokenized securities, tokenized fund units, or digital bonds. As long as it meets the criteria of a financial instrument, the underlying technology holding it, whether that is dematerialized or tokenized on a ledger, is eligible.
Got it. It's a very practical way to maintain relevance. And regarding eligibility, it's not just the assets, right? The law also addresses the beneficiaries, the parties who can actually hold the pledge.
Right. It covers a broad range of professional participants. Banks, alternative investment fund managers, depositories. But the really structural advantage here is the provision allowing pledges to be granted for future beneficiaries.
And how does that function operationally? Because I imagine for long-term financing, the parties change constantly.
They do. In a syndicated loan, for example, the lenders involved on day 1 might not be the same lenders in year 4. Under this law, collateral can be granted for beneficiaries who are present or future, provided those future beneficiaries are determinable.
Determinable. So as long as the parameters are set, you don't have to rewrite the pledge every time a new lender steps in.
Precisely. It preserves legal certainty without requiring constant operational resetting.
Which brings us directly to our second core takeaway. We know what is eligible. Now we need to look at constitution and opposability. And the briefing uses a very specific term here. It warns against decorative drafting.
Yes. Decorative drafting. This ties directly back to our main thesis. You can have a conceptually perfect, beautifully written pledge agreement, but if it is disconnected from the mechanical reality of how the asset is controlled, it is just decorative.
Because it fails the opposability test.
It's exactly. Opposability, or third-party defectiveness, requires actual dispossession under Article 5. The pledger, the party granting the security, can no longer have unfettered operational control over the asset.
So for, say, book entry financial instruments sitting in a custodian account, how do you practically achieve that dispossession?
It requires precise operational steps. If the depositary itself is the pledgee, the pledge agreement might be sufficient. But if a third-party lender is involved, you generally need a tripartite agreement between the borrower, the lender, and the depositary.
Okay, so 3 parties signing off.
Right. Or the instruments must be registered in a specific account of the pledgee or formally designated in the books of the depositary. If the contract says the assets are restricted, but the depositary's internal system does not reflect that restriction,
Then the opposability fails.
Exactly. That is the mismatch. The drafting did not match the operational reality.
What about claims, though? Because a monetary claim isn't sitting in a depositary account in the same way.
For claims, dispossession occurs simply upon the conclusion of the pledge agreement. However, there is a necessary operational step regarding the third-party debtor. The debtor can validly pay the pledger right up until the moment they are officially notified of the pledge.
Wow, okay, so if I owe you money and you pledge that claim to a bank, but the bank never tells me, I can just pay you directly and the bank loses its collateral.
Yes, the law protects the innocent third-party debtor in that scenario. Operationally, the pledgee must notify the debtor or obtain their official acknowledgement immediately. Without that execution step, the legal security is completely vulnerable.
It always comes back to the execution. And there's another major operational trap here regarding jurisdiction, isn't there? The governing law clause.
Yes, it is a common oversight. Simply stating that the pledge is governed by Luxembourg law does not end the compliance requirements. Article 23 introduces the lex situs principle for book entry financial instruments.
Lex situs, meaning the law of the place where the asset is situated.
Correct. If your pledge agreement is governed by Luxembourg law, but the relevant account is maintained by a custodian in another jurisdiction, Article 23 dictates that the local law of that custodian's jurisdiction will govern crucial proprietary issues.
So things like priority ranking and third-party effectiveness.
Exactly. You have to trace the operational structure to where the account is actually maintained. The legal review, the document alignment, the coordination with the local account bank, these are standard operational parameters necessary to ensure the security holds up.
Right. It's not just administrative overhead. It's the actual foundation of the security, which leads us to the ultimate test of that foundation and our third core takeaway. Article 11, the enforcement toolkit.
Article 11 is really the definitive feature of this framework. When an agreed enforcement event occurs, such as a default, the pledgee has a highly specific set of mechanisms available, and the statute provides that these can be executed, quote, unless otherwise provided for and without prior notice.
Without prior notice. That is a very direct, unmitigated path to enforcement.
It is entirely deliberate. It is designed to preserve the value of the collateral and maintain structural stability. By removing conventional procedural delays, Article 11 allows for immediate execution.
And what specific options does the pledgee have under Article 11?
The toolkit is extensive. The pledgee can appropriate the asset, meaning they take direct ownership and offset its value against the debt. They can conduct a private sale, sell it on a public trading venue, or seek judicial attribution.
And I see netting mechanisms mentioned here as well.
Yes, netting mechanisms are explicitly permitted. But again, tying back to our primary thesis, these enforcement options must be deliberately structured within the legal drafting. The contract must define the valuation mechanics and the timing. The statute grants the authority, but the legal agreement has to provide the precise operational instructions.
And the legislature has been actively refining these mechanics too, right?
Very much so. The framework is continuously updated to reflect market complexities. For instance, recent amendments added specific enforcement mechanics for fund unit redemptions. There are also extensions covering foreign provisions and EEA or third country arrangements, ensuring the law functions smoothly in cross-border scenarios.
So we have our 3 takeaways. We have statutory eligibility under Article 1. We have the absolute necessity of opposability and dispossession under Article 5. And we have the deliberate enforcement toolkit under Article 11.
And governing all of that is the central reality. The 2005 law is an execution statute. Your paper agreement must be a perfect reflection of the operational mechanics.
Which makes the external market environment so relevant right now, because those operational mechanics are facing a major shift. Looking at the market pulse as of May 2026, the source briefing highlights an impending deadline.
Yes, the transition to a T+1 settlement cycle, which takes effect from October 11, 2027.
T+1. So, shrinking the settlement window from 2 days to just 1 business day. How does that impact the specific collateral arrangements we've been discussing?
It creates an environment with zero margin for operational error. Pledged instruments are continuously interacting with trading and post-trading processes. Historically, a T+2 cycle offered a brief buffer to resolve any mismatches between legal instructions and the depository system.
Right, time to fix a typo or clarify an account designation.
Exactly. Under T+1, that buffer is eliminated. If a tripartite agreement is not flawlessly mirrored in the live control systems of the account bank, the accelerated settlement cycle will expose that immediately. Trades will fail.
So decorative drafting becomes a systemic operational failure almost instantly.
That is exactly the risk.
Yeah.
The execution standard has to be clinically precise from the moment the pledge is constituted.
Wow. It really emphasizes why treating this as just a paper exercise is so dangerous.
Absolutely.
Well, that leaves us with a final thought to consider. If the law explicitly recognizes distributed ledgers and the market is compressing settlement times to T+1, the trajectory points toward total automation. We have to ask how soon we will see fully integrated smart pledges.
Right, where the code itself handles the enforcement.
Exactly. Imagine an Article 11 enforcement event being detected by a smart contract, which instantly executes an appropriation, reallocating tokenized collateral across borders in milliseconds without a single manual intervention. The legal drafting and the operational reality would be literally the exact same lines of code. It's an interesting prospect for the future of secured finance.
It certainly is the logical next step for an execution statute like this.
Follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to Bertrand Mariaux and Rigore Media on YouTube. Connect with Bertrand on LinkedIn at bertrandmariaux.com. All links in the show notes. This was the Luxembourg Fundcast.